I'm Bailey White. I'm going to be your moderator and also get to host the first panel. This panel is pretty unique in that this is your chance to talk to the folks who actually enable the digital economy. These are the guys that pull the fiber, build the wireless systems, and operate the networks that we all use. And most of the time, I don't know about you, most of the time it's actually pretty hard to understand how these things work and also what the business plans are that these companies do. And they're really critical for all of us to be a part of this. So this is your chance to talk to some great people here. Let me kind of go through the list for you just briefly. We've got Terry Smith from AT&T. Terry, you want to say hello? Great. Mike McLean, ComSouth. Mike Scudden from Windstream. Sergio Penaloza, is that properly pronounced? Yep. That's great. He's from Cox. And then we've got Chris Bennett from Verizon. So great group. Now, we're going to do some different things today. We're going to try to make this conference a little bit fun. And I don't know if you've heard about Twitter. How many people here use Twitter? Raise your hand. All right, quite a bit. Okay, so we've been really trying to play this up. We want people to be able to ask questions either in person or via tweet. So I'm going to try asking my first question via Twitter. So let's see if this actually works. So it should pop up here in a moment. The question is going to be about internet service in Middle Georgia and what you're seeing in trends. Are you having to invest in additional infrastructure? Or what are you seeing in utilization? Give us some background on that. Whoever would like to.
So I think what is driving is a tremendous amount of investment across really all the providers, and that's not any different for us. We have a pretty significant commitment to continue upgrading our technology and investing in the footprint that we have really across the board. One of the things that we do as an organization at Cox is that regardless of the location, the areas that we service, we provide the exact same service across the board. It's not just investing in a large city or kind of a large-scale environment, if you will. We really commit to providing the services across the board to all our customers. So from that perspective, the trends continue, and as the evolution of the services and how consumers are starting to utilize the technology, we're just right alongside with them. We're going to continue investing on that. So,
thanks. Again, I'm Mike Scudden. I'm with Windstream. We have ILEC services across 18 states, and we provide broadband services in all those 18 states. And getting specific to Middle Georgia, we provide services to 98.5%, broadband services to 98.5% of the households within our footprint in Middle Georgia. That's higher than our Georgia average, which is a little less than 97%, and higher than our total utilization across our base of about 93%. So we've got a lot of coverage in Middle Georgia. We have spent an awful lot of money, and we've participated in partnerships with the federal government, specifically with stimulus, and we're participating in the Connect America Fund in order to get out to these very rural areas. Stimulus, just as an example, we spent over $1 million in Milledgeville alone for 350 households. As a private company, you can't afford to do that. With the partnership where 70% of that was paid by the federal government, 30% paid by us, it barely becomes affordable. So those are the challenges that we face as an industry, is trying to get into the most outer parts of our service areas.
Yeah, I would agree. We're headquartered in Hawkinsville and serve some customers down 4 or 5 miles down some dirt roads. We do have maybe 5% of that customer base that we don't have broadband to. But everybody else, we have fiber to the home or 1 gigahertz HFC with DOCSIS 3.0, which gives you the ability to do 100 meg or more. So we have made an investment in a lot of rural area, as many of our peers have, that you really can't put on paper and always make economic sense of. But we do think a kid down in rural Pulaski County ought to have the same opportunity as kids sitting in the middle of Atlanta. And frankly, we've made some investment that a lot of the bigger companies haven't made in the very dense metropolitan area. So, but the investment continues constantly.
Bailey, to answer your question regarding demand and use, and yeah, in Middle Georgia, I don't think it's a lot different here than it is worldwide, actually. Just as an example, and with the advent, obviously, of the smartphone, the launch of the iPhone several years ago really kind of catapulted the use of this access and demand for technology. In AT&T's experience, just since 2007, for example, the mobile data traffic, the traffic on that wireless network has increased on our network by 50,000% since 2007. That's hard to fathom, but that kind of increase is what you're seeing in this industry. And to meet that demand, that kind of demand, requires significant investment, and it's not really just one point of investment. There's several technologies you have to deal with in that kind of increase in demand. So I don't think the demand here is a lot different than what you're seeing worldwide or nationwide. There's great demand for access to technology in Middle Georgia.
I would echo those statements. My name is Chris Bennett with Verizon Wireless, a managed team of solution architects out of Alpharetta, Georgia. Specifically to the investment piece, not unlike Mike said, we serve states from coast to coast, and we've invested about $120 billion into the network since its inception, or the conglomeration of Verizon companies. What I would say is that specifically in Georgia, we've invested about $210 million in the last decade or so. It's a constant evolution of individual towers, backhaul for those towers, spectrum, which is the lifeblood of wireless. If you guys recall, there was an old analog television spectrum that was released, and Verizon Wireless purchased a large bulk of that for $9.6 billion, and that's literally airwaves. But most folks don't think of those types of investments. The spectrum auctions allow us to grow our network capacity and deploy newer technologies, and so we cover about 97% of all Americans from coast to coast. We've got contiguous spectrum in the 700 megahertz block, and we've now deployed AWS in the Macon market in Middle Georgia, which allows us greater bandwidth in this market and others. But certainly see a lot changing as we talked about the smartphone growth and penetration. Over half of all of our users are on smartphones today. Almost 90% of the devices that we sell today are smartphones. So that is a growing trend, and of course machine to machine, which we'll talk about in a little bit.
That's great. So we've got our first question on Twitter that came in, I see. It says, it's from Todd Wall. It says, what's being done to accommodate the needs for higher speeds and allow for more capacities?
Go ahead and start that. Again, it's back to the same thing as constant investment in the network. So we're constantly investing. We're working with the FCC and Connect America Fund, for example, to place more fiber. The real technology at the physical layer is fiber, right? Fiber to the house, fiber to the distribution point, fiber to the node. These will all enable us to be able to provide higher and higher speed services that are required by the customers within our footprints. So you'll see us invest heavily in the fiber technologies. I just got back from the World Broadband Forum in Amsterdam, and it was interesting to see all the different countries and their approaches to this same phenomenon that they're trying to resolve. But we are increasing the requirements. The requirements on the network are increasing at about 50% per annum, and that puts a lot of strain on anybody's network. But at the same time, as we branch out and provide higher and higher speed services, that also helps increase that same problem in the core. So investing out in the local and in the core in order to keep up with those technologies.
Yeah, I would also say the same thing. I mentioned the demand, the growth on our specific mobile data network. And to meet that demand, it requires investment. And specifically in my case, and that's what we're asked to speak to, is that in the last 7 years, our company has invested in the country. Now, I'll narrow it down in a moment. $119 billion on infrastructure build-out. That's billion with a B. That includes, as has already been mentioned, wireless structure, wireline structure, fiber cable, tower placements, those kinds of things. And in fact, in 2013, the Progressive Policy Institute identified us as the top company for U.S. capital expenditures on network investment at that $119 billion. In Georgia, we have invested just under $5 billion in network, and that's, again, fiber at cell tower locations. That's building out the network to provide greater capacity, greater coverage, greater performance, and reliability. In Georgia, in Macon, Middle Georgia area, I think I mentioned this a couple of months ago in a Middle Georgia CEO electronic newsletter that was released, that we have spent just under $26 million in Middle Georgia since 2011. So, to meet the demand, you've got to invest. And that investment is significant in terms of my company. And we're continuing to evaluate those needs as we identify what we need to do and how we need to do it. And you will see those announcements and those kinds of things that we're doing as a company to address that demand as we do that each year. So significant investment is required to meet that demand, to answer that question.
At ComSouth, we actually provide backhaul to both AT&T and Verizon Wireless to cell towers. I think as we are the smallest guy in the room, we have 600 miles of fiber to cell towers. Some of that's through a third party, but a lot of it serves these two companies. The other thing we've done, the important thing to understand about a piece of fiber is there's really no limitation on bandwidth except the electronics on both ends of the fiber, if it's spliced right. We have a client in the room here that we have brought a 1 gig direct internet access circuit from 56 Marietta, which is the telecom hotel in Atlanta. We bring 1 gigabit to our office and redistribute it to 4 of their locations through a router. So they are enjoying 1 gigabit symmetrical access directly to the internet because we have fiber through a third party to 56 Marietta in Atlanta, and we have fiber directly to their office location. I think you're going to see more of that. I'm not sure the wireline guys sitting up here are going to be still sitting here if the world proliferates 1 gigabit to the house for $70 a month, but I'm not sure those economics work. But I'll let others speak on that. But end of the day, the world communications is about fiber deep in the network, and hopefully fiber all the way to the premise, and eliminating the copper, which is a very expensive proposition, but it is the end game.
Billy, I would add that you have to also look at the context of the user experience on this. If you look at today, there's an average of about 7 devices accessing these broadband networks from the home, from game consoles to telephones to computers and iPads, all these devices. So that's obviously creating a demand for higher speed, not just for the sake of being fast, but for the sake of accommodating the proliferation of those devices in the home. One of the things that we've done, and we've had a pretty significant commitment to continue that increase of speeds. We just announced our Gigablast technology footprint that, within the next 18 months, we're going to be a gigabit provider across the enterprise, everywhere. Everywhere we have a footprint, we're going to provide that, including Middle Georgia as well. We're starting the trials in other markets in Phoenix, Las Vegas, and Omaha. But our commitment is really to bring that gigabit service to all of our customers, including here in Middle Georgia. The other piece I would say is that this is really not, for Cox, this is not a new thing, getting to the higher speeds. We've been providing this level of service to a lot of our business customers for a while. And case in point, we have a great partnership here with Bibb County, where we were able to build actually a 40 gig. It's not a 40 gig link between sites, but it's actually a 40 gig network to accommodate the footprint of all the schools to support 25,000 students. So from that perspective, we're going to continue investing, and it's not, again, not just to try to be the fastest or to try to provide that hey, we're a gig company. It's more of what we see from a trends and user utilization of technology that's really driving a lot of that need for the faster speeds.
And specifically to the FCC definition of broadband, we've seen a lot of varying definitions to wireless services over the years. 3G, 4G, EVDO, HSPA, LTE. All these are acronyms for different technologies. And the reality is that, as Sergio said, it's all about the customer experience. It's about providing enough bandwidth to satisfy the broadband needs of our customers and applications on devices like smartphones, tablets, and routers. So as such, we've always been pretty modest with our commitments from a broadband perspective. Our network will deliver between 5 and 12 meg down and 2 to 5 meg up guaranteed. Now, when we look at the reality of that, we can actually see 80, 90 meg in some areas over a cellular LTE connection. And that's only going to get better over time, because right now we're operating in silos with regards to our wireless airwaves, the spectrum I talked about earlier. So the 700, the 1700, the 2100, those are separate silos. And in the future, with LTE Advanced, we'll be able to aggregate those and provide a much larger pipe to deliver broadband services. And you'll see that not only will the capacity for users on the network increase, but the overall bandwidth and network experience will be better for all users.
What happens, I know we're getting a bunch of interest in this, which is great, just on Twitter, and I'm sure in the room too. I've got one more question. I'd like to actually let people in the room ask questions as well. So what happens with wireless versus wired? I mean, we see these changes, right? And both technologies are quickly growing. A few years ago, a few megabits was great to the home. Now people are talking about going to a gig. I think in many parts of the state now we have, I think, over 100 to 500 meg being offered by cable providers. What happens over time? Do wireless and wired catch up? Does wireless always lag? Does it leapfrog at some point? What are your thoughts?
Well, I'll take the first stab at that. I think that the two will always coexist. As we talked about earlier, a lot of our cell towers, or all of our cell towers, have landline backhauls to them. They all pretty much have fiber. So landline's a necessity. The question is, do we bring fiber to the home, to the point made earlier? And that's a significant investment. Does the home need fiber? Can fiber go to the tower outside of that neighborhood and the neighborhood receive their connectivity through cellular? These are all questions that aren't answered today, but the trend that we're seeing is that there's more and more mobile devices, and customers, our consumers, appreciate the flexibility, the ability to pay for one ISP or internet provider and to roam with that internet service. So giving them the freedom to take it with them on the go, whether the speeds match that of landline services, obviously they don't today, and that's reality, but they're very fast, and they're only getting faster. So I think it comes back to the investment made, and we will see both technologies increase in speed.
Really, I would say that very similar. I think it's going to require both. Cisco Systems had recently some study on the evolution and the data needs that they're projecting into the future. And when they started looking at the numbers between all the transponder space that we have in satellite and all the cable infrastructure that we have across the nation, there's not enough bandwidth from either one. So it's going to be a combination of the services, and really at the end of the day, it's going to be the evolution of technology. Technology is not just on the fiber side, but my partners here, they presented the case of technology evolution that has to be in sync with that. We're trying to get, it's almost a dollar per megahertz in terms of how much activity, how much capacity we can send through the electronics. So at the same time, we're partnering with all our technology vendors and really pushing them to develop faster, better technologies to really deliver that service, because capacity is really going to outpace us pretty quickly regardless of technology, whether it's wired or wireless.
I think that's correct. I think the marketplace to a large extent, will dictate some of what happens. And there's certainly consumers out there that will want the flexibility of mobile and will be satisfied with mobile only. I think mobile will always be a bit slower than landline when you're talking about fiber versus the airwaves. But again, for many consumers, that'll be fine. For businesses, though, I think it's going to be a landline play for the most part, especially when you're talking about their core infrastructure is going to be on landlines. We're providing today 100 gig services to businesses across the country. Some very well-known people. I won't go into who, but we see that trend going up. Many customers are buying 10 gig services. We sell those quite often. It's kind of funny when I first got into the industry, and I'm not sure I want to tell you how long ago that was, but a 1.5 symmetrical service T1 was a big deal. And it took you 30, 45 days as a service provider to provide it. We provide 10 gigs in days or hours, and so it's changed quite a bit. But I think, again, on to the question, the wireline in the business is, I think, always going to be, while wireless will have a big play in business service offerings, the core infrastructure for businesses will be landline, and then the residential will be a combination of both.
I think basic physics, there are limitations to wireless just due to physics. It's going to be, you load up, we've been in wireless 3 times, sold out all 3 times very successfully, but we haven't been in the last 5 years or so. With LTE, XLTE, you got a lot of bandwidth, but you load up a cell tower and you put hundreds of customers on it, they share that bandwidth. So every fiber to a home has a certain amount of bandwidth, whereas a cell tower is sharing a certain amount of bandwidth. So the economics just don't make sense that, in my mind, and I'm not a wireless engineer, but that you could do a 1 gig offering from a cell tower anytime in the near future. I'm not saying it won't come with 10G instead of 4G or 5G, but I tend to agree. I think there's a comfortable coexistence there. Again, we're already providing backhaul to these guys, and I'm sure Cox is doing 50 times as much backhaul as we're doing. But if the internet continues to proliferate and new applications demand 100 meg, 1 gig, there's going to be a demand for that wire to the house. And to your point about 7 wireless devices, all 3 of the wireline guys sitting here, we probably all are in the Wi-Fi business and probably have, you got a 50 meg connection at your house, you may have 7 or 8 connections to that wireless Wi-Fi antenna that goes back to that wired circuit. So that person may take that on the road and use it cellularly, or they may go to watch their kid's high school game and avoid what we call cellular offload, use the wireline network to avoid the upcharges on wireless, and go connect to Wi-Fi at the school or at their business. So just because it's untethered doesn't mean it's a traditional cellular, what old term cellular device. It could be just a mobile device that's actually connected back Wi-Fi to a wireless, to a wired connection.
I would agree with the other panelists. I think the wireless and wireline networks will coexist. There has to be that, I think, mutual support. However, what I've seen in my industry, I don't mind telling you, I've been in our company 40 plus years. Seen a lot of changes in 40 years. And what I see now and what we've seen demonstrated by that 50,000% increase in mobile data traffic is more and more things are being done wirelessly. There's obviously always a need for that big pipe to a location that supports a large business or large industry. But we're seeing many businesses, small businesses especially, go to wireless-only operation. We see more and more use of wireless services in the healthcare field. You think about the mobility of nurses in rural areas. You think about the use of wireless devices within institutions. Obviously, you still have that Wi-Fi connection there. But the capability of wireless is growing and growing, and we're seeing it more and more in the business space. So I think there's always going to be a room for both of those services. The big, strong pipe tethered to anchor institutions or to locations. I'm not sure every consumer needs a gigabit. Maybe they do. I don't know. But you have to, I think you have to mitigate that demand and that need by the location, the type of environment you're in. You've got to know what your market's going to be, and you've got to address that. And obviously, as a company, we're investing significantly on the wireless side, and we see that as as a big part of the future of telecommunications. And however, that wireline piece will, I think, still be a part of it.
We got a question in over Twitter on how to balance home versus business use. And more and more people, right, are working from their homes. They're doing things there. You're seeing potentially very high expectations in terms of consumer connectivity. Businesses actually may be more realistic in terms of saying, well, I only need so much because they're paying enterprise pricing. How are you balancing the tension between the home and business, basically pricing and expectations?
You can start that. Once again, we have the network capability to provide whatever someone might need in their home or their business. We have the infrastructure in place, pending discussion with them what they need. But I think the issue you have to look at is what type of quality of service levels do you need? What are your requirements in your business or what you're doing? If you're working from your home, you may not be able to secure the quality of service levels you need for that service to do your business. You have to consider, okay, what kind of circuit do I need to buy? What do I need to pay for in order to make sure I've got a dependable circuit that's up all the time, that kind of thing. So I think you have to just kind of sift through what your requirements are as a business person, as an entrepreneur, or as a consumer to figure out what best suits your need. If you can afford to have less than the full bandwidth that may be marketed at times, maybe just the basic service would work, or a non-quality service would work. But I think you have to try to acknowledge what your needs are in your business, in your effort as a consumer.
I think that when you talk about business and residential, it's not so much about balancing the technology as it is about balancing the services. So businesses need a higher level of service, a higher degree of service, more. They've got to be cared for better, because any downtime, any point in the day where they can't transact business, of course, it's costing them money, and it's essential to their operations. And obviously, as a consumer, and if my broadband goes out at the house, I get upset, even if it's out for 5 minutes, right? Just like everybody else in the room. But it doesn't cost me money. If my business is out for 5 minutes, it costs me money. I can't do credit card transactions. I can't conduct business. And so I think that that the lean from a services perspective will always go towards business and trying to take care of the business customer very well, and other services, add-on services of security, firewalls, cloud operations, those type of things. And for the even medium-sized businesses and large businesses, it's cross-country, point-to-point services and those type of things. But that's really where it is. Not so much technology as it is service.
Yeah, I think similarly, I think it's the technology we provide really enables companies to operate differently. It's not all going to be everybody goes to the main office. It really enables that mobility across the board. So I agree, it's less of a technology issue and pricing on but it's more about how you deliver consistently, whether you're at home or you're in a business. I think what he does bring, though, it's a different challenge of how do you manage technology remotely, right? And this is, we provide the service, but I think companies that are actually managing that, they need to understand, the risks and the implications, how a remote user is going to really utilize the technology. But I think our footprint and our technology really is just the enabler for that, whether you're a business user, a residential user, or a combination, to where you may have, your company doing remote type services from your main office. I mean, that's so prevalent today. But I think it's just more the enabling piece for us. There's this concept out there, a lot of the IT organizations are managing the bring your own device, the BYOD, is how do you manage that access to employees that have either that variability on device or the remote and so forth. I mean, it's just bringing kind of a different, more services-oriented challenge versus really providing the foundation or the technology to deliver. I think we enable that, but it does, it is not on one or the other. I think it's more of a combination of how you really deliver, regardless whether you're in the residence or your place of work.
Yeah, I think Sergio hit on a point there that I'd like to expand on, and that's BYOD. So, you know, we've all seen the consumerization of IT and really the proliferation of applications, not from the top down, but from the bottom up. These are coming from educated consumers who are finding more productive applications on their mobile devices and tablets than they had on their PCs of yesterday. So the reality is that, you know, businesses today, of course, they're going to have their core hubs of infrastructure for landline services, but they're also going to use wireless services to either rapidly deploy in areas that they, you know, landline services aren't available, have the flexibility to roam between. There's all sorts of applications where, you know, I'll give an example. You know, there's a company called Redbox. Redbox is owned by many of you. Actually, does anybody in the room know who owns Redbox? Coinstar, that's right, exactly. So Coinstar had kiosks in grocery stores, and literally, you know, they were working for pennies, and they said, what can we do with this real estate contract? And the reality of that is that they couldn't do anything that required internet connectivity without some sort of wireless service from a cellular provider, because they couldn't ride off of the backbone of the existing grocery stores and drugstores. So, you know, they literally upended the movie rental industry just because they had the availability of an internet connection that connected that kiosk to their application, that brought down trailers for movies, you know, ran the point-of-sale credit card transactions. You know, it's a great example of how businesses are actually achieving their goals through wireless. And actually, I've got a slide. If we could pull up slide 2. It really speaks to why businesses would deploy wireless services. Really, there's 3 reasons. You're looking at either improving their efficiencies of that business, improving the customer satisfaction through services. This could be, you know, things like tracking packages or things of that nature. Or, you know, it could be in generating revenue streams. The generating revenue streams would be, you know, based on the Redbox model. So, you know, this is a great example of why a business would look to cellular, where maybe the landline service might not provide the full portfolio. Sorry for the slide mix-up.
That's a great example. I'd like to let some people ask questions that are here in the room, physically as well as virtually. Who's got a question? We've got microphones on both sides.
So we have a number of startups in Augusta that are using mobile data for what they do, but we're finding that it's becoming a crippling cost for things. And how do we bring the cost of mobile data down for them?
So I guess I'll take that one. So the cost of mobile data services is certainly changed over the last few years. I think you all remember where, you know, wireless companies were charging for minutes of service and giving away data. And that was when basic phones were the norm, right? And we were trying to encourage folks to move to smartphones and smart devices and use the data internet services. And the fact was they really weren't using those devices to their fullest capability. So probably 4 or 5 years ago, you saw a shift in the industry, which really moved from unlimited data to a tiered data model, and moved from a tiered minute model to unlimited minutes. So pretty much all carriers now on the wireless front offer unlimited minutes and unlimited texting and traditional services where you used to have to pay per, you know, per call, per text. And the reality is today, data is what is most used by these users. So we've got applications that will stream video from your smartphone. We've got IP cameras, you know, a couple that are out on the table outside that, you know, will literally use 1 terabyte, 2 terabytes, 3 terabytes a month over a cellular connection. And the reality is that those resources, the backhaul, the towers, to the point made earlier about the number of users on towers, those are limited resources. So we have to make that transition to a tiered data service in order to meet the customer's demands, because if we have one user abusing that tower, it affects all users on that tower. So I know that doesn't specifically speak to price. I think what you'll see is price will, I think, normalize. We've seen overseas a lot of the price reductions come from the unsubsidized devices. Subsidized means, when you walk into your cellular carrier and you get a free phone, that's not really a free phone. Somebody had to pay for it. And providing those services, that subsidy over a period of a contract is not something that is done, quite frankly, overseas a lot. And I do think that as you see those devices work their way out of that equation, there may be a reduction in cost that you're looking for.
I think another thing that you'll see in the industry over time is more and more of your applications will actually use less bandwidth and require less bandwidth. There's the whole notion within programmer community that bandwidth is precious, and so there'll be constant compression techniques and other techniques used to reduce the amount of bandwidth required to provide the same type of services. And the next generation of services that you're buying and using it for will, I think you'll see a constant downtrend in not the overall bandwidth usage, I'm not saying that, but certain applications will require less and less bandwidth and be quicker and quicker on existing networks, because that's what the programmers are trying to do in order to differentiate their products from others.
I don't know that I have a great answer, but we have a really good opportunity in front of us with Wi-Fi, I think. Wi-Fi really is going to enable a lot of this really across all markets or regions, all cities. It does require some significant investment, and we're all little by little starting to tap into that space now. A lot of the large providers, we're kind of partnering to try to make sure that that infrastructure that we're deploying on the Wi-Fi space it kind of covers the footprint. So if a customer or subscriber that we may have in the Middle Georgia footprint may be visiting Omaha or something, can they actually connect to the broadband services if they're physically in their footprint? So that's a lot of the integration that I think all the providers are learning how to partner on that, because I think that is really the space where we can leverage technology to enable that cost reduction for subscribers.
I really don't have anything different to add, just to reinforce the idea that to provide facilities and capabilities to meet the demand that we've described requires significant investment. And investment is the key, and it costs as this demand goes up. Every time you change an iteration of technology, that's a pretty costly endeavor. So the cost to provide those services are certainly a consideration in that pricing. And I can't speak to how that will change over time. I just know from experience, as was already been mentioned, that minutes used to be expensive, and we give away minutes now on wireless. So I think you have to look at the evolution of the technology and its use and how it's provided, but understand to meet the demand is a significant investment by companies like ours to be able to do that. And so trying to recoup that investment and make a return to a shareholder or whatever is a key piece of a business plan and business operation.
That was a great question, a great discussion. Anyone else in the room want to ask a question?
Do you see anything changing on the regulatory horizon that allow more vendors to participate in providing service? I know it's very regionalized except for the national carriers, and there's a lot of regulatory hurdles you got to get in a space. So if y'all could just speak to what you think the climate will be in the next several years about more providers in the same territory.
I think the regulatory front needs to be focused more on how to encourage investment than it does how to encourage competition, to be honest. But the barrier to competition is not as much a function of governmental policy with regard to restrictions specific to placing new networks. It's more this whole theme that we've been talking about this morning, which is the incredible investment. So for a new entrant into any of our areas, wireless, wireline, small area, big area, the cost, the business case associated with those costs to get across the threshold and out into the business is really what's the big gating factor. I would say it's not so much the regulatory environment. But the regulatory environment does play a big role, but it needs to be focused, again, in my opinion, it needs to focus on techniques that would help the incumbents, frankly, invest additional dollars and provide more services as a better model than necessarily bringing in competition.
Yeah, I would echo those same comments. I think the regulatory environment, especially on a national scale, is such that we face competition in every market we're in, significant competition on wireline and wireless side. And I think the prohibitive factor in some competition is investment required, significant investment required to build out infrastructure and build networks. I will say that what we're concerned about on a local level, not speaking specifically to Macon and Middle Georgia, but all local municipalities and localities, is the issue of trying to build our network and build out infrastructure for that network, specifically on the wireless side. There are, in some cases, great restrictions and significant things in place that kind of delay or prohibit or impact the placement of structure to provide wireless services infrastructure. And we think as a company that if we focus on those in the municipalities and in the communities we live in, that would encourage investment. That would encourage other providers to come in and place facilities or infrastructure to provide the services that you need. So I think there's on a national scale, I believe the regulatory environment is conducive for competition. I think there's just an investment issue there to cause any lack of that. But on a local scale, I think there's some things that we can do to help encourage investment on building out the wireless network specifically. And I encounter that actually most all the time in terms of try to siting towers and trying to build out infrastructure to provide that wireless capability.
So, on the wireless front, regulation is a really requirement. We're operating on licensed spectrum, which was purchased, and without the FCC actually segmenting that, auctioning that spectrum, and providing it to carriers, we couldn't do what we do today. And with regards to competition, obviously, there are tons of opportunities for businesses, with capital investment to enter into the space, and we've seen everything from satellite providers, provide broadband services to dial up to DSL to cable modems and cellular. But the reality is that it's that sizable investment that is often the barrier. Now, what we've done as a part of our leased or our LRA or leased rural areas. We're actually leasing back some of those airwaves to specific local companies where maybe we don't want to go in as a large carrier nationally and invest in that specific rural area, but there's a carrier locally who wants to do that. So they basically lease the spectrum that we purchased from us. And that's proven very beneficial to quickly build out the network. We built out the network roughly twice as fast as we've built out the previous 3G network. But regulation is required. Obviously, there's regulation to incentivize the build-out of broadband services, and that's welcome as well. But the competition's never been more plentiful, I believe.
I would just add one thing. We feel that really what can really make a difference in how we deliver services is really the innovation. And we feel as a private organization that the investment and that innovation is what really drives a lot of the competition. So I think right now it's we don't see ourselves as competing with our peers here, but it's more about how do we continue innovating, because the end user really at the end of the day is what's driving a lot of what we do. And as long as we're kind of keeping that in mind in front of us, I think the innovation and the investments that we're doing really is the key for us to keep growing.
Any other questions from the room? Okay. I've got one more, which is, if you look at industries in general, right, with customer satisfaction, we know that as important as your industry is, people tend to kind of complain about it, right? And customer satisfaction scores generally are lower by the like J.D. Power, American Customer Satisfaction Index type of thing. Why is it that we all need internet service so badly, right? And if we don't have it, we beg for it, but yet when we have it, we still like to complain.
Is there a psychologist in the room, please?
Yeah, we all stand in front of the microwave, right, and say, hurry up, right? I just, I'm not sure I can answer that specifically. I'll just let, from our perspective, we're continuing to, as I've mentioned a number of times, we'll continue to build out the network to provide the capability and capacity that our customers expect from us, at the quality of service levels they expect from us, and just do our best to meet those needs. And we've done that for over 100-something years as a company, and we'll continue to do that, investing in this infrastructure to meet these demands that we've been talking about. They're so critical and it's important for us to do that, and I'm sure that's, not the answer somebody might want to hear on that thing, but our investment is focused on providing what the customer, whether business or consumer customer, needs to do their life, basically, or do their job. So that's what I would say on that.
So I'm no psychologist, but what I'll say is I think it's human nature, right? If you don't have a choice, then you dislike the choice or the option provided to you. And I really think that it comes down to that when you're looking at getting internet service today versus in the past, you have many more choices today. And the cost question came up earlier. Verizon is not the cheapest provider on the block. We know that, but our customers are genuinely happy, right? We provide a solid service. It's reliable. It's got a large footprint. And I think that providing the services that your customers need and expect is first and foremost, but giving them options, making sure that they know they've got options for internet service. And ultimately, I believe that that's what will make a happy consumer. And we believe we can hold our own from a Verizon front. And we've done pretty well for the last few years.
I think the fundamental issue is that you have a ubiquity of demand, but not a ubiquity of supply. And until supply can meet that demand, either through incumbents or competition or however that's met, you're going to have more grumbling than you would in many places, right? So our company, like others, was quick to get out with broadband services to very rural places, and it took a lot of energy and a lot of resources to do that. Not just capital resources, but human resources in order to get that done. Before we could even get that finished, then it was the next generation, the next generation, the next generation. So you've got this ubiquity of demand. So every child that's in that 6th grade class has got to do their assignments on the internet, whether they live 10 miles from town or whether they live in town. So constant demand or a ubiquity of demand became instantaneous. But supply takes a while to work its way out, and I think that's where the industry sees itself in large perspective, especially in the rural areas of America and the rural areas of the world.
From our perspective, I think it's more of a core value. It's how do we define that customer experience and what internally as an organization we do to strive to get to that customer experience. The 3 values that we hold the highest regard on about our people, our customers, and the communities we serve, they're so entrenched in our culture that is really what drives everything. It's not an end state for us, meaning it's not that we're going to get there. It's just how to continue evolving that customer experience and really providing that great experience, not just on the products that we have, but really on all the interactions that we have with our customers, whether it's a residential customer or a Cox Business customer, regardless. That experience is what really drives a lot of our mindset. What I would say is that as you've seen the transformation of technology over the years, we've been working real hard in that experience to the point that things that we engage on, like our Cox Business $2 billion business, getting some of the J.D. Power and Associates awards, third-party awards, is not something that we did. Same thing with broadband service. and even our telephony product, all of them have been recognized by that commitment that we have as an organization to that customer experience. Again, for us, it's a core value, and this is what we feel sets us apart, is just that commitment to the customer on their terms, not on ours.
Hey, thank you all very much. We appreciate it.